I uploaded a video about 3 weeks ago showing how we converted our small space behind the shed into a garden. And I wanted to follow up today to show you how everything's growing and the progress of the plants. But before I went into that, I also wanted to talk about the container types that I used initially when I first started a year ago gardening, as well as the soil mixes that I used. And before I even went into that, I just want to say that I'm definitely not a professional gardener. I've only been doing this for a year. And so I'm just kind of winging it, seeing what works, what doesn't work. I do a little bit of research on the crops that I'm interested in growing, but I just kind of experiment and, like I said, see what works for me. So just wanted to share that with you, and let's get into the containers and soil. The first type of container would be these terracotta containers, and I like them because they're porous, so you get good airflow down into the roots. You also have these fabric containers that I've used, and these are by far my favorite because it allows for good air circulation down into the roots, good airflow. And also the fabric prevents the roots from going root bound. So the plants grow into a much healthier, bigger plant. That's been in my experience. The third type would be these black plastic containers that I used, and I didn't have that much success growing in them, and it could be due to the weather that we have here. It just gets really hot, and so I don't know if it was just with the heat and also not very good airflow down into the roots, but the plants seem to either bolt or go to seed too fast, or they don't grow as big and vibrant. We have the onions growing back here, and they seem to be doing pretty well. But it could also be the depth of the container. But I've had a lot more success growing in these fabric containers. Now, the soil that I used is a mix of potting soil. So I just got your typical standard organic potting mix at Lowe's or Home Depot. In my case, I bought mine at Home Depot. And with the potting mix, I also have, I bought bagged compost with cow manure. I'll put photos up here because I don't have the products with me right now. And I also added bone meal, which provides phosphorus for the roots, and blood meal, which provides good nitrogen for the plants. And I also have a worm tea, which is a liquid worm casting solution, and the plants really love that. So I water that with the worm tea every couple of weeks. Now, I buy bagged compost, but I'm also in process of making my own compost. So I have 3 piles going. This is the newest pile. And so what happens is, over time, I would say 6 months up to a year, this will break down and become a smaller pile, which I have 2 piles over here that broke down already. Well, they're in process, but they broke down a lot. And I'm doing compost the simple way, in my opinion. I'm not adding any meat or dairy products, bread, nothing like that. I'm only layering browns and greens, and I mix those together and I let it decompose for the amount of time necessary. And so if I come over here and I move this over, you'll find the soil's already starting to break down and it's becoming black and really healthy. I also have 2 potato plants, volunteer potato plants that sprouted up here trying to grow. So we'll see how that goes. But browns and greens, so your browns would be, what I did was I gathered dead leaves from the property, dead twigs, any dead plant material. I also added some cardboard from cardboard boxes and some newspaper and brown packing paper, some twigs, mulch, things like that. And then for the greens, I throw in a mixture of when we mow our lawn, so the grass clippings, the plant trimmings, and also my food scraps. So anything that I would cook with that I would normally throw away, like the ends of garlic or the onion peels, the banana peels, anything like that, any fruit or vegetable scrap that you'd normally throw away is what I would also add in here and mix all together. And with the rain, sun, wind, and bugs and animals, worms, over time all of those work together to break this down, and then it turns into a very nice black nutritious soil. It's essentially your compost. So only thing missing in here would be the cow manure. However, this I would throw on top of the bed that I have down there, or I would add it to containers just like I would normally with the compost that I buy. Starting with the mulberry tree, it's doing really good. It has fruit on it, but the fruit keeps getting pulled off by the squirrels and the birds. Also, I have leaf-footed bugs that like to come out and suck the sap from all the fruit. So for now, while the plant is young, the netting will be on there to protect the fruit. But then when it gets a little bigger, obviously I don't mind sharing, so I'll take the netting off. The containers are still here. I'll have them in containers for the rest of their cycle. There's different kind of hot peppers here, basil, red chard, sage, some onions back there, some garlic that I harvested that I'll include a video at the end of this one on that harvest. It was just one bulb of garlic. I did harvest a few others that I grew in a different container, but this one was very large and weirdly shaped. This cattle panel trellis it now has the beans growing on both sides, and then it has the passion fruit starting to crawl up here. And then I have a passion fruit on the other side as well. There we have two plants. One is purple, one's yellow. I still need to remove this grass and plant these in. So here's what the area looks like now. Everything seems to have grown in and recovered nicely. I'll throw a photo up here of what this looked like 3 weeks ago when we first installed the cattle panels and had first transplanted as well as planted new seeds in the ground. And so here's what it looks like now. And we have our poblano peppers down there. Got eggplant back there, kale, basil, parsley, and these tomatoes are the ones that we had transplanted, and there's a lot of new growth on them. These are the beef steak tomato plants that were super small 3 weeks ago, and they just exploded. We have a squash back here. Some rosemary, thyme, chives coming in, bush beans, and some watermelon that will be growing along the trellis up here. These are in containers because they're more of a like cool weather crop. Well, at least the broccoli and the cabbage are. And so in the afternoon, I will put them back here behind the shed so they can get some shade. That CD is hanging on there because when I initially planted these papaya seeds in here, they were getting eaten by the birds and the squirrels, and so nothing was sprouting up. And so when you put that there, it kind of scares them off. And back here are the sugar baby watermelons. I've got a new one popping up here. And then I was able to get the banana planted in the ground as well as the papaya. So on the other side of the yard, I have these sweet peppers growing separate from the hot peppers in the back. And the reason why I have them growing here is because they apparently can cross-pollinate. So with the hot peppers. So let's say that flowers are forming on here and I have fruit forming, and somehow the flowers pollinated the hot peppers, for instance. If I were to harvest those peppers that have all been kind of cross pollinated with each other, and if I were to try to save those seeds and plant new plants later on, those new plants might produce a pepper that should be sweet but is slightly spicy because it cross pollinated with a jalapeno or habanero plant, and vice versa. My habaneros or jalapenos might not be as hot because they cross pollinated with these sweet. So, just to keep everything kosher, I have it all separated for now. I haven't really tested the theory, but I might later on. And then right back here is our little twiggy pomegranate tree, which she's just now waking up from the winter dormancy. Now, there is an exception to the soil that I use for all of my plants versus the soil that I'm using for these blueberry plants. So, we have a local nursery by our house that sells organic fruits and vegetables, or plants, I should say, trees. And so, this nursery also supplies these nursery pots, and you can ask them to fill them with the soil that they use for their blueberries for a small charge, and they did that for me. So I bought the blueberry plants and then separate containers. They're growing in 15-gallon containers. The soil was way less expensive than if I were to have tried to buy all the, mixes and ingredients and mix it all together. So this came out to be way less expensive. But the reason why I have netting around here is because anytime the fruit begins to ripen, the birds and the squirrels pick them right off. And because they're such small plants, just like with the mulberry, I wanted to be able to harvest some for me and my family, but the netting will come off when they're at least double their size. They'll grow to about 5 feet tall, possibly even taller than that, a little bit. But the soil, they prefer a more acidic soil, and it has to be very well draining. They don't like their roots to stay wet for long.